Act 1. Return to Millbrook. What if everything you knew about your family was built on a lie? The question echoed in Elvie Blackwood's mind as she stood before the imposing iron gates of Blackwood Estate, clutching a weathered envelope that would change everything. The letter had arrived 3 days after her husband James's funeral, its contents forcing her to confront the very foundations of her family's legacy. Rain pelted the windshield of her parked car, where her daughter River sat, headphones firmly in place, deliberately avoiding her mother's gaze. They hadn't spoken more than 10 words since leaving Boston, the weight of their shared grief creating an invisible wall between them. "Mom, are we actually going in, or are you just going to stare at the gate all day?" River's voice carried that familiar edge of teenage defiance, but Elvie detected a slight tremor beneath the surface. Elvie smoothed her rain-dampened hair and took a deep breath. "Just giving us a moment to prepare. It's been 5 years since we've been here." The estate loomed before them, a Victorian masterpiece of architectural grandeur that had been in the Blackwood family for generations. Its weathered facade held countless secrets, and Elvie knew she was about to uncover one that would shake their world to its core. As they drove up the winding driveway, Elvie noticed a moving truck parked outside the neighboring property, the old Sullivan place that had stood empty for decades. A tall figure in a dark coat stood watching their arrival, and something about his stance made her heart skip a beat. Adelaide Blackwood waited at the top of the mansion steps, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite the weather, her posture as rigid as Elvie remembered. "You're late," she announced, her voice carrying across the rain-soaked garden. "The lawyer's been waiting for an hour." "Hello to you too, Mother," Elvie muttered, helping River with her bags. "I wasn't aware we were on a schedule." "Everything is on a schedule, Evelyn. You, of all people, should remember that." Adelaide's eyes softened slightly when they fell on River. "At least you've grown into your features, dear." River rolled her eyes. "Miss you too, Grandmother." Bunchi. Inside, Marcus Chen sat in the library, his familiar face a welcome sight among the oppressive formality of the Blackwood home. He'd been their family lawyer for as long as Elvie could remember, and something in his expression told her he was dreading what was to come. "Elvie," he stood, embracing her warmly. "I'm so sorry about James. He was a good man." "Thank you, Marcus." Elvie felt tears threatening and quickly blinked them away. "Now, what's this about? Your message said it was urgent. Close, 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 close." Adelaide cleared her throat. "Perhaps River should wait upstairs." "I'm 19, Grandmother. I'm not a child anymore." Marcus intervened smoothly. "River should stay. This concerns her too." He opened his briefcase, removing a thick folder. "What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but it's important you understand the full implications." He glanced at Adelaide, who had turned to stare out the window. "It concerns your father's will, Elvie, and a secret that's been kept for nearly 40 years. The room seemed to grow smaller as Marcus began to speak, and Elvie felt the foundations of her world begin to crack. Outside, the mysterious neighbor continued to watch the house, his presence a harbinger of the changes to come. None of them could have predicted how their lives would unravel in the weeks ahead, or how the arrival of Thomas Sullivan would force them to confront truths they'd spent decades trying to forget. Act 2. Unraveling threads. The secret, when it finally emerged, was devastating in its simplicity. Harrison Blackwood, Elvie's father and the patriarch of the family, had left behind more than just the estate and the family's restaurant empire. He had left behind another family, one that had a legitimate claim to everything the Blackwoods had built. "That's impossible," Elvie whispered, her hands shaking as she examined the documents Marcus had brought. "Dad would never." "Your father had another daughter," Marcus said quietly. "Born 3 years before you, to a woman named Claire Sullivan."
River's head snapped up. Sullivan? Like the empty house next door? Adelaide's voice cut through the tension. That house was never empty. It was purchased by Harrison 35 years ago for Claire and her daughter. They lived there until Claire died last month. The revelation hit Evie like a physical blow. You knew all this time? Of course I knew. Adelaide's voice was tight with controlled emotion. I agreed to the arrangement. It was simpler that way. Simpler? Evie stood, anger replacing shock. You let me believe I was an only child. You let me think Dad was... She couldn't finish the sentence. Again, your father was a good man who made a mistake when he was very young, Adelaide said. Claire was pregnant before he and I even met. When I discovered the truth, we came to an arrangement. Claire would stay quiet, her daughter would be provided for, and our family's reputation would remain intact. Marcus cleared his throat. The situation has become complicated because Claire's death has triggered certain clauses in Harrison's will, and because... A knock at the front door interrupted him. Adelaide's face went pale. Because, Marcus continued, Claire's daughter has decided it's time to claim her inheritance. And that's her brother at the door. The man Evie had seen earlier, Thomas Sullivan, stood in the entrance hall, his dark coat still damp from the rain. His resemblance to her father was subtle but unmistakable. "Hello, Adelaide," he said softly. "It's been a long time." The next few weeks passed in a blur of revelations and confrontations. Thomas Sullivan, it turned out, was Claire's son from her first marriage, and he had spent years piecing together the truth about his sister's parentage. His arrival in Millbrook wasn't coincidental. He had come to ensure that his sister finally received what was rightfully hers. The sister in question, Catherine Sullivan, remained conspicuously absent, communicating only through Thomas and a team of lawyers. Her demands were simple. She wanted recognition, a seat on the board of the family's restaurant company, and a share of the estate equal to Evie's. River surprisingly adapted to the chaos with remarkable resilience. She spent hours with Thomas, learning about the aunt she never knew she had. "He's different from what I expected," she told Evie one evening. "He's not angry or bitter. He just wants justice for his sister."
Evie found herself drawn to Thomas, despite her initial resistance. He had a quiet strength that reminded her of James, and an honesty that was refreshing after decades of family secrets. Their conversations, initially tense, grew longer and more personal.
"I never wanted to disturb your life," he told her one evening as they walked through the garden. "But Catherine, she deserves to know her family." "I understand," Evie replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I just wish I'd known sooner. All those years of thinking Dad was perfect, that our family was perfect." "No family is perfect," Thomas said gently. "But some are better at hiding their imperfections than others." The crisis came to a head when Adelaide suffered a minor stroke brought on by the stress of the situation. In the hospital, she finally revealed the full truth. Harrison had wanted to acknowledge Catherine publicly, but Adelaide had threatened to leave him if he did. "I couldn't bear the scandal," she admitted to Evie from her hospital bed. "My own mother had been humiliated by my father's infidelity. I swore I wouldn't let that happen to me." Meanwhile, the family business began to suffer. News of the scandal had leaked to the local press, and reservations at their flagship restaurant plummeted. Evie, who had taken over operations after James's death, watched helplessly as their reputation crumbled. It was River who proposed a solution. "Why are we fighting this?" she asked during a particularly tense family meeting. "Catherine is family. Maybe instead of trying to keep her out, we should be finding a way to bring her in." The idea took root slowly. Marcus worked with both sides' lawyers to draft a new agreement. Thomas acted as mediator, his presence becoming increasingly important to both the negotiations
and to Evie personally. One evening, as they worked late in the library, Thomas looked at Evie with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Catherine wants to meet you," he said. "She's ready." The meeting was scheduled for the following week at a neutral location, the small cafe where Harrison had first met Claire all those years ago. As the day approached, Evie found herself torn between anxiety and hope. Evie Bases said, and Claire, after that, fate had other plans. Redemption's price. The morning of the meeting, Evie arrived at the cafe early, her heart pounding. Thomas was already there, but his expression stopped her cold. "Catherine's not coming," he said quietly. "What? Why?" "Because," a familiar voice said. Evie turned slowly to face River, her daughter, her constant companion through grief and chaos, who stood with tears in her eyes. "I'm Catherine's daughter," River said softly, "and your sister is my mother." The revelations struck Evie like lightning. River, her River, wasn't her daughter at all, but her niece. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. James's reluctance to have children, his insistence on adopting River as an infant, his strange reaction whenever Harrison visited. "James knew," Evie whispered. "He knew all along." Thomas nodded. Catherine was young when she got pregnant. She wasn't ready to be a mother, but she couldn't bear the thought of her child being raised by strangers. When she learned that you and James were having trouble conceiving, it seemed like fate.
River finished.
A way to keep me in the family without revealing the truth. Evie sat heavily in the nearest chair, her world tilting on its axis. "Why tell me now?" Actress. "Because Mom, Catherine, is sick," River said. "The same illness that took Claire. She wanted you to know the truth before—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Where is she?" Evie demanded. "At the hospital," Thomas said. "She was admitted last night." Hoodie-bot. The drive to the hospital was silent, each person lost in their own thoughts. Evie's mind raced through 19 years of memories, seeing them in a new light. Every time River had reminded her of someone she couldn't quite place, every time James had given her that sad, knowing smile when River achieved something remarkable. Catherine Sullivan lay in the hospital bed, her resemblance to their father startling. She smiled weakly when Evie entered the room. "Hello, sister," she said. The conversations that followed were painful, beautiful, and healing. Catherine explained how she had watched Evie from afar, how giving River to her had been both the hardest and easiest decision of her life. "I knew you would love her," Catherine said. "I knew you would give her everything I couldn't." In the days that followed, the Blackwood family underwent a transformation. Adelaide, from her own hospital bed, finally embraced the truth she had hidden for so long. The family business was restructured to include Catherine's inheritance, and River, caught between two mothers, found that love could multiply rather than divide. As for Evie and Thomas, their relationship evolved into something neither had expected. In helping to heal their broken family, they found their own kind of healing. 6 months later, Catherine passed away peacefully, leaving behind a letter for Evie. "Dear sister, we lost so many years to secrets and fear, but through River, we found a way to be family after all. Love her as you always have, not as your daughter now, but as the bridge that finally brought our family together. With love, Catherine." Evie stood in the garden of Blackwood Estate, watching as River laughed with Thomas while they planted Catherine's favorite flowers. Adelaide sat in her wheelchair nearby, smiling more freely than Evie had ever seen. What if everything you knew about your family was built on a lie? The question that had started it all no longer haunted her, because sometimes she had learned lies could lead to truths more powerful than anyone could have imagined. And sometimes family was less about blood and more about the choices we make to love each other, despite everything.